Good thing. You ready? Go ahead. I wish I did. I'm too tired. Oh, let's get these guys going. The microphone's live.
The microphone is on. Excellent. Good evening, everyone. If I could have everyone take a seat. Standing or sitting? I'd like to welcome you to this evening's Candidates Forum put on by the Chamber of Commerce. And I am Cindy Melanson, the president of the Chamber. Please be aware there are handicapped restrooms in the hallway right back here. If anyone needs the restroom, there's also restrooms over here. We'd like to thank the Chamber of Commerce membership for putting this evening together for you. We'd also like to really thank all of the candidates participating for joining us this evening. And we'd also like to thank the community television who is filming this evening and broadcasting live. So make sure you wave and say hello. We're all on TV tonight. He's also going to air the program as many times as possible between tonight and November 6th when we vote. So if you weren't here tonight or know someone who's not here this evening, they can probably catch it on the local community TV. And we would not be able to do this without the services of our moderator, Attorney Randy Walker, who's moderating this evening for us.
Thank you, Cindy. You always do a great job. Cindy serves as the president of the Chamber, and always a big thank you to Mary DeVries, who's the executive director of the Chamber, who puts all this together. My name is Randy Walker. I'll be serving as the moderator this evening. We invited all the candidates for the state representative and state senator position to come, and 5 of the 7 accepted. 2 did not, and I'll read a statement from one of the candidates. For those of you that do not know the people on the stage, and I'm sure you all know who everybody is, but we have State Senator Jeb Bradley, State Representative Edie Damaris. We have John McDonald, who's running for the state representative position. Dave Owen, who is also running for the state representative position. And Matthew Place, who is also running for the state representative position. So the last 4 are running for 2 positions. Senator Bradley is running for state senate, and is one libertarian candidate as well. Those are the 2 that did not come. Members of the Chamber were invited to provide me with questions, and I have a number of them that have been provided this evening, but most of them I have received already, and we'll be using those questions tonight. If we run out of questions, we'll open it up to the audience to ask questions, and if you have a specific question you'd like to ask, feel free to write it down, bring it up, and if we have time, we will get to it. We're here tonight to provide the candidates with an opportunity to tell us a little bit about themselves, their position on issues, and if elected, what they would like to do, so that we can all make an informed decision next Tuesday, November 6th, and we're going to vote in Wolfeboro from the hours of 8 to 7 right here in this building. This event is being televised, so when any of you speak, please make sure you speak into the microphones so that we can clearly hear your answers. Tonight, we'll follow 5 simple rules. Tell us a little bit about themselves and the ideas that they may be passionate about, just 1 or 2 ideas. 2, this is not a debate. This is the purpose of tonight's meeting is to have a neighborly, civil, collegial, and friendly exchange of ideas. 3, all candidates will be able to answer every question. So any question that's posed, all 5 candidates will answer that exact same question. And after you've all had a chance to answer a question, if someone would like to respond or elaborate on something that they've said, just raise your hand and we'll have an opportunity to make a brief follow-up. After about an hour of questions, around 6:45, we'll let each candidate have a few minutes to make a closing statement or closing remarks, with the goal that we'll be done by 7 o'clock when we'll go off the air. So that's the format. Why don't we get right into it, and we'll start with Senator Bradley to say a few things about himself, and we'll go left to right all night long, and we'll just move to Edie for the next question. And I know all 5 of these candidates, so I'm going to refer to all of them by their first name. I don't think anybody will be offended by that. So, Senator Bradley, you're up.
Thank you very much, Randy. Thank you all for coming, and for our television audience, and to all of the other candidates who put their name on the ballot. If I might, Randy, take just a moment of personal privilege, I want to introduce Karen. Karen and I just got married on August 4th, and obviously that's a wonderful thing in my life. And for those of you who don't know her, I wanted you to get a chance to meet her. Obviously, it's been an honor for me to have served in many different capacities over the years. First in the New Hampshire House, then as a member of Congress, now for the past. I grew up in Wolfeboro. My parents owned Bradley's Hardware for a long, long time. I owned Evergreen Natural Foods. I had a paint contracting business and developed the Wolfeboro Marketplace with Chip Maxfield and a couple of other people. So I've been in the community a long, long time, and I have to say there's no place better on God's green earth to live than the oldest summer resort in America, especially with Karen. And it's also been an honor to serve our state, our community, and to serve in Congress and our nation. And my priority through all of those jobs has always been the same: to focus on your jobs, a growing economy, and opportunity for people in Wolfeboro, in Senate District 3, and in the state of New Hampshire. That's always been my top priority. It will continue to be my top priority. That's why I led efforts to overturn the governor's veto on the biomass bill. We were successful. 900 jobs statewide, many of them here in Carroll County, depended on our hard work. No different, quite frankly, than when I was in Congress and led efforts along with Judd Gregg, John Sununu, Olympia Snow, Susan Collins, Tom Andrews from Maine, to overturn the Defense Department's recommendation that the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard close. 5,000 jobs, we were successful. We are very fortunate, I believe, in New Hampshire to have a growing economy, an economy that has the 4th lowest unemployment rate in the nation, the lowest poverty rate in the nation, the highest median family income, and growing paychecks. And I have to take another moment of personal privilege. The sunset is absolutely gorgeous. We have a growing economy, and that's a good thing. And I've worked hard, whether it's to make New Hampshire more competitive on business taxes, workers' comp reforms, to lower the cost of being able to do business here, and the proof is in the pudding. And what has been especially important from that is not only the jobs that have been created, but the revenue growth that has enabled us with a good budget to address the heroin crisis, the mental health crisis, upgrades to the Division of Children, Youth, and Family to protect kids from abuse and neglect, for families with a disabled child, for new resources for municipalities to do road and bridge repair, school safety enhancements, and finally, 10 years ago. Those last 3 things all help reduce property taxes. So my priority will continue to be the same: to solve problems, to grow the economy. And I'm going to highlight one problem here because it's a significant
And quickly,
problem.
your couple of minutes is probably over.
I'll be quick, Randy. Formula that could bring back the statewide property tax. 11 towns in my district, under a bill that was thankfully defeated in the New Hampshire House, 11 towns in Senate District 3 would have become donor towns and had a donation to other communities of $10.5 million. You have my word, I will fight long and hard, and hopefully successfully, to make sure that we don't become a donor town here in Wolfeboro or Moultonboro or any of the other 11 towns. Advantage, grow jobs, and have
All right, I'm going to read a statement from Chris Meyer, who is running for the state Senate. And we also don't have to stand up. If you feel free if you'd like, but traditionally we haven't stood up. So this is from Chris Meyer. Hello, everyone. First of all, I want to apologize for not being able to attend this event. This is the same night as an annual event at the Mount Washington Chamber of Commerce, of which I'm a member, and I was committed to attending long ago. Thank you all for strengthening our democracy through providing accurate information about our candidates for public office and their positions on the issues. I live in North Conway with my wife Jenny and our 2 children. Jenny is a special education lawyer with Cooper, Cargill, and Chan. My practice involves helping local individual is a service. However, I feel that as he has moved up in Republican leadership, his focus is pulled towards representing the GOP, not District 3. On specific issues, I am strongly opposed to the school voucher bill that was introduced last legislative session. Vouchers and similar schemes would decimate our difference between a $5,000 voucher and $50,000 per year at Phillips Exeter. School vouchers play politics with our local schools. I was also strongly against Majority Leader Bradley's defunding of the state's contribution to the retirement system of local police, firefighters, and teachers. When Bradley's law removed all state support for the retirement system, it put the burden entirely on our property taxes and property owners. Moreover, the only beneficiary to date has been corporate tax breaks and corporate welfare and subsidies. That's not fair. In closing, I look forward to seeing you in the community and welcome any questions about my position on any issue that affects you, your family, your business, or our county. If you have any questions or concerns about my positions on the issues, please visit my website at Meyer, MEIER4NH.org, or send an email to info@meyer4nh.org. Thank you for all attending this forum and keeping our democracy vibrant and alive. Signed, Chris Meyer. We'll move on to Edie. State Representative Edie Damaris.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to see you all here. I didn't plan a 5-minute political speech, I'm sorry, but I will take my 2 minutes. I have lived in Wolfeboro for over 50 years. I raised my family here. I started the Children's Center in 1974, and I grew it from a small group of 3 teachers and 30 children to when I retired. I had a staff of 56, and we had 7 programs, in-home programs and in-center programs that served children from 3 months old to 12, and disabled or not, or able, and with family services that we provided in the home and at the center. When I retired from that, I started my next career in working for Workforce Housing to bring it to Wolfeboro. That grew out of a Needs of Women survey as far as what the needs were, and the Carroll County Friends of Families Coalition. And I spent the next 12 years bringing Harriman Hill to a real community group. So at the Women's March in Washington, I decided that I had to stop complaining about what was happening in our country in women's rights, and also the uneven resources that people have in our communities, and that I should run for office, which I did. I've only had 1 year in Concord, so I am still quite a neophyte, although I've learned a lot and it's been a fascinating trip. I made some progress, but I don't agree that we have arrived. I think we have a lot to do. We still have a lot to do to stop the difference in resources for families in our communities. And it is something that we have to address, because While it seems like in the big numbers that our economy is really flying high and doing great, you can go, there's an underbelly to that. And especially in our North Country, and where young people don't have much hope, and we see suicide rates climbing. We see a lot of families struggling. The median income is high but we have a lot of people who are not well-to-do. And we need to work harder to make our economy work for all of our people, not just nationally the 1% or in New Hampshire the top 10%. We need to work together to make. Thank you.
Thank you. John.
Thank you, Randy. My name is John MacDonald, and I'm a lifelong resident of Wolfeboro, New Hampshire. I have raised 3 children, and I have 2 grandchildren. I've been on the Wolfeboro Budget Committee now for about 28 years, and I've been chairman for probably the past 10 to 12 years. My career spanned about 30 years in law enforcement. I retired from the New Hampshire State Police, and after retiring, I went to law school, and I graduated from law school, and I passed the Massachusetts bar. But anyhow, I've lived in Wolfeboro all my life, and one of my main living conditions of Wolfeboro, make a better place for us all to live and to raise our families, and eventually for my daughter to come back with my grandchildren. And one of the things that I'm adamant about, I will never support. I think those would kill our economy and really hurt the community in large. Also, Senator Bradley mentioned about the donor town. Most of you folks are around, we used to have the donor town concept, and that went away. And now there's certain elements within the New Hampshire legislature that want to bring that back. And that would cost the taxpayers of Wolfeboro about $1.5 million if it passed. So I would vote against that. Thank you.
Dave.
Mr. Moderator, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. I would just like to start out by saying that I'm extremely honored to have served as the town's town manager for 11 and a half years. And it was a great experience, a very enriching experience for me, and I think we got a lot achieved. Just as a little refresher for those of you that may not be familiar, when I arrived here in Wolfeboro Public since the 1990s, because it was in violation of all sorts of fire code and building code requirements. So this room is one of the outcomes from my tenure. Also in 2006, when I arrived here, the town was under administrative consent orders from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services. The town was under We had also just been served with a complaint from the U.S. Department of Justice about the town's lack of ADA access. That's the American Disabilities Act. So we went to work on those issues, and we got the town out from under the moratoria on water connections and sewer connections so that builders could start getting building permits and the local economy could start thriving again. And we addressed over a couple, 3-4 years, all of the ADA accessibility issues and got out of under the thumb of the U.S. Department of Justice and their process. Also, I remember when I first arrived here, the then Parks and Rec director showed me this what I thought was extremely ambitious concept plan for everything they wanted to do, which involved sheds, building a new Abenaki ski lodge, and also building a new park pavilion for the Foss Field complex. And when I first looked at that, I went, holy cow, that's I don't know if we could ever get all that done. Well, we did, actually, over a period of 10 or 12 years, achieve all of those things. So the community, I think, made a lot of progress, and part of the reason I'm running is because I'd like to continue to assist the town of Wolfeboro and its residents to achieve the town's goals and to assist the residents in their needs. So that's why I'm running, and I'll be open to entertain any questions that you have.
Thank you, Dave. And Matt.
Thank you. I'm Matthew Platch. I live on a farm and on Brackett Road at the south end of town with my wife, Wendy, who's, if I could take personal privilege, she's sitting over there. Children. We moved here 8 years ago. I used to come here every year as a kid, and my fondest memories growing up were being in Wolfeboro. So this was, I brought Wendy here and she loved it, and we decided to settle here. I've been an attorney for 32 years. Major corporations, pharmaceutical companies, chemical companies, major communications carriers. I've represented individuals and Indian tribes, states, state governments, city governments. Right now I'm doing work for the city of Los Angeles and city of San Antonio. I know how government works, how to get things done. I've handled deals worth totaling billions of dollars probably to help folks here in Wolfeboro. Our state's on a roll. Our economy's doing really well here in New Hampshire. We're lowering business taxes. We're attracting new people to businesses here. I agree with John that we should not be raising income taxes right now. We should not be raising sales taxes. We certainly should not be bringing back donor towns. When I saw HB 1802, which would have brought back donor towns and would have cost Wolfeboro $1.5 million, I was very concerned. We don't need to be raising our property taxes $1.5 million right now. It's not a good idea. It's not what we want to be doing. I think every Democrat voted for it, which is their prerogative. I would not have, and I will not going forward. Thank you.
All right, so let's get to the questions, and we'll start with Jeb, and then we'll work clockwise. I have two questions right off the bat regarding drugs. The first one will relate to marijuana. So the question is this: should marijuana be legalized or decriminalized? And if it's legalized, should it be regulated and taxed? Basically, what's your position on marijuana? And again, we'll start with Jeb, and then we'll work left to right.
So in the past, I have voted against medical marijuana, but after talking to people, one of whom my daughter's best friend when she grew up, how important medical marijuana was to her, I saw it differently. Now we allow medical marijuana. A doctor. I think that's the appropriate response. I also wrote the decrim bill that we have now in New Hampshire. So 3/4 of an ounce, 3 offenses, it's a violation level offense. I have kids, I have 4 kids. So I have firsthand experience with what happens when, kids get into trouble. And I don't think any of us who are parents, and I suspect most of us that are here are parents or grandparents, and I don't think any of us would want possession of 3/4 of an ounce. In terms of recreational marijuana, what happens in some of the other states that have already allowed recreational marijuana: Maine, Massachusetts, Vermont, Canada, Colorado, Washington, Oregon. I think the jury is out in terms of safety on the highways, and there's also a message. We're in the middle of a heroin crisis. We'll get to that question in a moment. I'm not sure in the middle of a heroin crisis legalizing marijuana for recreational purposes makes sense when we're trying to convince people not to start with opioid addiction and become addicted. Thank you.
Edie.
Hi. I would for sure vote for medical marijuana. I think it is a very important option to have for people who deal with chronic pain, and I think it's a major step and a much better improvement than using opioids. I do strongly think that it should be available to people who need it. I had very mixed feelings about decriminalizing marijuana use, because I feel that with Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, Canada, we're surrounded by states in another country that have decriminalized it. So there are going to be people driving through our state which I did, but I did it with still some concerns, because after talking with our police chief, he said it's very difficult. If he stops someone who appears to be driving erratically, and how impaired that person is. Whereas someone with marijuana, we don't have that kind of test. So there are some concerns with how much should be legal. I think that the small amounts, and I know we also voted to clear the records of people who had received records, like young college students who had records because they had been found with marijuana, and we cleared those records too, which I thought was a really important thing to do. I also have and they range from teens to the early 20s. So again, I'm hoping that we can come up with some way to measure the amount of marijuana that is being used in a person's body, so we can control how much they have taken and if they are driving impaired. So, and I know, I agree with Jeb, we are starting to find out, we're getting records, the number of automobile accidents. There have been an increase in accidents in some of them, but we have to wait until we get more data before I think we should do any more. And I would like to clarify one thing. I have never voted for a state income tax or sales tax. I know it's been said.
We'll get to those issues. I'm going to cut
Okay.
you off on that.
Okay.
Let's stick to the issue.
Thank you.
Yeah. John.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with the medical marijuana, that being allowed, and also with the recreational marijuana under 3/4 of an ounce. As I said, I was in law enforcement for over 30 years. And just to top on some of the issues that Edie just spoke about, there's a difference on, if you remember going to driver's ed class, you got a little card that said, if you weigh 200 pounds, 6 drinks makes you 0.08 or 0.10. There's no test for that for marijuana, okay? There's no card that you can give a 16 or 17-year-old that's driving on how much marijuana is safe to use, because they don't know. Marijuana stays in your system for about 30 days, where alcohol, as soon as you stop drinking, it starts to dissipate after several hours. So they have to come up with some standard where, or prima facie case, which means when you're legally under the influence of alcohol, some standard for that, and we don't have that. Some states have 0.05 THC level, and some states are different. There's no standard for that, and that's one of the biggest problems we face if we start selling, allowing the sale of marijuana from stores and liquor stores or whatever. The other issues that I like to deal with is, if you're going to let someone smoke marijuana while I'm watching the concert on Saturday night downtown Wolfeboro in the summer, I don't want that if I'm with my grandchildren. There's got to be some other protections for the citizens that don't want to be around the marijuana not to participate during that. And then I have a lot of concerns on how it's going to be sold. Is it going to be sold in the liquor stores? Are we going to have shops in downtown Wolfboro that are going to sell pipes of marijuana? Who knows? I don't know. But at this point, I would be against anything more than the 3/4 of an ounce possession.
Dave, and your card has been twisted by your microphone. If you want to straighten it out, your name card.
Oh, the name tag.
There you go.
Okay, very good.
There you go.
We want to let people know who I am, right?
Sure.
Well, I think it's inevitable that recreational pot is going to be legalized in New Hampshire eventually, and that we ought to get around to planning how that is going to happen, to put the proper controls and regulations and such in place. when you think about it, we're a little island. We've got Massachusetts below us, Vermont and Maine, and the whole country of Canada that have already legalized recreational marijuana. Now, Massachusetts, where they voted to do that by referendum a couple of years ago, they've been proceeding about implementing that very slowly and cautiously. And I think if it were to be done here, it would also have to be done very carefully and cautiously, because a lot of the controls, like John was saying, they're working on the technology to have breathalyzers for marijuana, but I don't think that technology is quite there yet. So, but things are moving in that direction. Also, the state of New Hampshire, of course, is always strapped for revenues, and it just so happens that New Hampshire already has an infrastructure in place with the New Hampshire state liquor stores that it could be controlled, regulated, taxed, and be a healthy source of revenue for the state. So I think we ought to get busy and start planning and how to implement this.
Matt?
Sure. I support what the state has done so far with decriminalizing marijuana. I would hate to see a young person's life ruined by having a record for marijuana possession, a criminal conviction. I also support the use of medical marijuana under a doctor's supervision, with a card, prescribed amounts. I mean, we're prescribing fentanyl, which is a really potent drug. Marijuana is a drug. If it has a use in medicine, I think we should use it, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I do not support legalizing marijuana. I know there have been some bills in the legislature. I know a lot of people supported it. I'm not there yet. I have a lot of concerns about what would happen. I have a lot of concerns about what's going on in Colorado right now with increasing crime rates, increasing use by children, underage, young teenagers using marijuana. I don't think it's good. I don't want my kids using it. I have kids in high school now. I don't want them using it, and so I'm not there yet. Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to the next question, and that is, and this is a question that was presented to me, and it starts off with New Hampshire is in a drug crisis. In 2016 and 2017, almost 500 people died from drug overdose. I'm going to drop off of that and go back to the question that I had. So that we have an opioid problem in New Hampshire. Is the solution treatment? Is the solution tougher enforcement, tougher penalties on drug dealers? Is this a self-created problem? And to what extent should we be paying for heightened treatment, heightened incarceration? What's your position on that issue? And we'll start with Edie on this one and loop around.
Okay. There's no question that we have an opioid crisis. It's not just here, it's in other places around the country. And I kind of think a lot of our answers are kind of all of the above we talked about. I think we have to deal with the drug dealers. I think that is critical because they're putting additives into the opioids as well. We need to deal with the physicians who are over-prescribing different drugs and opioids. We have to deal with that issue. We have to deal with treatment. We have to find more ways to identify those who need the care and to treat them. I know our county attorney has been working with the jail because some of the people who are addicted, they tend to also get into crime and to selling it themselves because to feed their own addiction. So when you're dealing with any addiction, it's a cyclical issue. And they're working very hard to figure out in our county jails and in our crime enforcement to find out what the issues really are and to work together to deal with them. We do need more resources in our counties because it's especially bad in trying to find treatment when you're in our rural communities. So I know that we do have some funding that is coming to our county that's going to help our various agencies to work with people to provide more help for them. There are some different programs that are becoming more and more available. But I think we need to develop more programs and to have more resources so that we can get to it earlier and try to prevent some of the problems that happen in the families because of it. We have a record number of grandparents raising children because of this drug program. So we also need program supports for them as well. So it's going to take a major effort, I believe, to deal with it. It's going to take funding for programs. It is going to take commitment from communities. We're going to have to work within our schools to deal with the various effects of it that's affecting our families. So it's going to be multifaceted, but we are in crisis and we just need to do it. So.
John?
Thank you. So I would agree the opioid issue is a crisis. The New Hampshire legislature dealt with some issues this past session where they created a group of New Hampshire state troopers down on the southern part of the state to try to interdict some of the opium and the heroin and things like that were coming into the state. I would, of course, continue to support that. And also the legislature, I believe they did quite a bit of funding this year to programs such as, I think it's called White Horse, that's got an office up in Ossipee, and they just opened a new office in Conway. My basic philosophy is if someone's arrested for possession of heroin, okay, and he wants to get clean, okay, that's a felony in New Hampshire, you have him sign a waiver of a speedy trial, and you say, okay, you have a year to get clean. Because you've got to put some incentive in these folks. If you think of this, if you're willing to stick a needle into your arm that you don't know where that came from, that may have comet or something else in it to get high, there's something wrong. What incentive can I give you to make you get off that drug other than the threat of going to possible incarceration? Okay. This way, if you give them a year to get clean, if they get clean, the felony goes away. Maybe give them a couple chances, but you've got to have some incentive for these folks other than, I guess, the possibility of dying isn't enough incentive for these folks to get off the drugs. But we got to provide the services, make those services available, whether you can afford them or not. And that's one of the things we've got to step up and do. Thank you.
Dave?
Well, I'm not so keen on, law enforcement, of the. Let me back up and try another approach here. The war on drugs has been, all it managed to do is fill up the prisons with a lot of drug users. And I fully support law enforcement arresting the people that are selling this stuff to kids and other folks in the community. Here in Wolfeboro, there is a serious opioid crisis. We've had quite a number of deaths, opioid deaths. When I was working for the town and was in close communication with the fire chief and the police chief, I would hear all these stories about the responses that they were making, and sometimes they weren't in time or were not successful in reviving the person. So there's been a major issue just here in the community. I agree with John that you have to have incentives to provide these people, but you also have to have the funding for the programs. And if I were to be elected, I would definitely be supporting the funding that's necessary to support these programs like the White Horse Addiction Center over in Ossipee and other similar programs, because there's no use setting up incentives if there's not the money there in the programs to provide the follow-through with these people. So that would be my approach. Thank you.
Matt?
Sure, thank you. We have a really serious problem with opioid addiction in New Hampshire, in Carroll County. New Hampshire is about one of the worst places in the country for opioid addiction, along with West Virginia, some places in some counties in Kentucky. we are not going to fix this quickly or easily. Need a major effort on law enforcement to stop the people bringing it into the state. I work with cities, with police departments down along the border of Mexico. And what I hear from my clients is it's coming in every day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The drug cartels are organized. They're using state-of-the-art communications equipment, state-of-the-art distribution networks, and business organizations to get it, to deploy it throughout the country and bring it to New Hampshire. It's coming in through ports in Boston. It's coming up through Lawrence in Massachusetts. It's a serious problem. I've talked to Chief Rondo about this. He said that 52% of the arrests he made in the past 12 months, that the police department in Wolfeboro has made in the past 12 months, have been related to substance abuse, and many of those have been for opioids. So we have to do something about this. And by the way, he says 90% of the people that he arrests for substance abuse are also using marijuana. Just so he sees it as a gateway drug. We do need a major push on law enforcement. We also need treatment. The kind of treatment where you get a 30-day program and then you're out on the street doesn't work. It needs to be long-term, residential, community-based, with a lot of support in the community. There's some faith-based programs that are working quite well through the churches. I think we need to look at all the alternatives for how to deal with this. The problem's not going to go away. If we just remove penalties for illegal use of opioids, it's not going to dissuade people from using them. They're going to keep using them. Once they're addicted, it's very, very hard to get off them. So I don't think there's an easy fix. I don't think there's a quick cure. We have to deal with it, and we have to be smart about it. So.
And Jeb, you're the last one on this.
Thank you very much. There is no question that there is no greater public health issue in New Hampshire than the opioid crisis. So let me touch base on some of the things that we've done, because going back to when Senator Hassan, then Governor Hassan, was governor, I chaired a commission that in 2015 made numerous recommendations, and some of the things that came out of that are the following. We did dedicate new resources to law enforcement, not to go after casual users, that's not the problem, but to target drug dealers that are bringing heroin and fentanyl across our borders into this state. That's what Granite Hammer did. That's what adding 5 state troopers to the drug task force did. That was my legislation. It was bipartisan. We also reformed insurance laws to get easier access right away for people that want to get treatment. In the budget last year, we increased funding for prevention, treatment, and recovery by 64%. That's a huge amount of money, absolutely essential. We finally fully funded the drug and alcohol fund at 5% of liquor commission revenues, something that was long overdone, but something we did in the budget. I worked with Cindy Rosenwald, a Democrat from Nashua, on a bill a couple of years ago to reform prescribing guidelines, something Edie mentioned. We've already done that so that doctors know that there are guidelines for prescribing OxyContin, Percocet, etc. Perhaps the most important thing that we did, something that was my legislation, that I got an awful lot of grief from folks in my own party, was expand Medicaid. 13,000 unique individuals have gotten treatment for substance abuse as a result of Medicaid expansion. Without that, the problem would have been even worse. The twin cousin of substance abuse is the mental health crisis that we have. There are, on average, about 40 to 45 people on any given day basically being warehoused in emergency rooms. We started through my legislation last year in the budget that dedicated $20 million of new resources for the mental health crisis to start to make an inroad in that. There's no one single solution. It's going to continue to be an issue. It still is an issue. And if you give me the opportunity to go back to Concord, my top priority next year will be a provider rate increase so that we have the infrastructure to make sure, whether it's Whitehorse or whether it's New Futures in Concord or whether it is any number of substance abuse providers throughout our state and mental health providers, actually have the resources to be able to stay in business. That is a top priority for us in the budget next year, and I look forward to leading that effort. Thank you, Randy.
All right, the next question, John will start off, and we'll talk about voting rights. SB 3 has been in the courts recently as to whether voter rights are being suppressed or whether the purpose is just to protect and preserve the integrity of the process. So the question, John, to start us off on is, what's your position on voting rights?
I would support, if I was in legislature, I would support SB 3. I think it protects our voting in our country, in our state, and in our town. The only thing that it does, as far as I understand it, is you have to show some proof that you live in Wolfeboro if you want to vote in Wolfeboro, whether it be a electric bill. My daughter, I had to sign, she lived with me, I had to sign a letter stating that she lived with me and lived with me for the past year or so, and she was allowed to vote. And if you come in to vote and you don't have that, you can still vote, but you've got to come back in within, I think it's either 10 to 30 days, and prove that proof of residency. And then if you don't do that, the ballot clerk or someone can look into your background, look into you know, the electric light bill, the internet, to see if you reside in Wolfeboro. If there's nothing success there determining whether you live in Wolfeboro, they can send it over to the Secretary of State's office, and the Secretary of State can determine if you actually live in Wolfeboro. So it protects us from any type of voting fraud, it protects our integrity, and I don't see what the problem is. What is the problem with either showing a driver's license or showing an electric light bill if you want to vote? And you can still vote, you just got to come back within 10 or 30 days to show that documentation. I think it's a good protection for our society, and especially when it comes to elections. Thank you.
Dave?
I oppose all forms of voter suppression, including SB 3 and other efforts here. You know, in New Hampshire, we don't have a significant minority population like they do in Georgia, or a significant Native American population like they have in North Dakota. So the one group that we have that doesn't vote the way that the Republican majority in the legislature currently, that they don't like, are students. So we have to discriminate against students. So these are the same people that, you know, the point is always that we're an old state and we need to encourage young people to stay and live and work in our state, but what do? We make clear that they're not really welcome here. We don't want them to vote here, so I oppose it.
Matt?
Sure. SB 3 does not change the law about who can vote in New Hampshire. Let me say it again. It does not change the law about who can vote in New Hampshire. The same people that could vote under prior law can also vote under SB 3. It doesn't suppress anybody's right to vote. What it does is it requires that you provide some sort of proof that you're actually domiciled where you say you're domiciled. And if you don't have that proof, when you go to register, even on the day of the election, you have either 10 or 30 days, depending on where you are, to bring in that proof. And a simple document that you're registered as a student at a school, at a university or college in New Hampshire is enough proof. So it doesn't suppress any college student or any university student's right to vote in New Hampshire. I don't know why people keep saying that it does. It just doesn't. It just requires that you provide some sort of proof of who you are and where you live.
Jeb?
Thank you very much. I agree with Matt and John, and the fact is that no one's denied the right to vote. No one is denied the right to vote, in particular college students. If you're worried about college students voting, all they have to do is show that they're domiciled in whatever dormitory that they're domiciled in. It's very, very easy to do that. You know, we heard the same argument several years ago about voter ID, that when you came to vote right here in this room, you have to bring your driver's license. Yeah, I know, I forgot the first time. I got over it, I learned. I always come with my wallet now. And you know what? A vast majority of the public support our voter ID laws. Why? We want to make sure that everybody's vote counts the same, that we have clean elections, that we have transparent elections. And this is just a simple insurance policy to make sure that people who claim domicile, not residency, domicile, actually can show some proof that they are domiciled here. And you don't have to do it, as others have said, on the day that you vote. You just have to come in after the fact and show that proof. So no one's denied the right to vote. I think it's a very simple change, and it's one that will ensure that we have clean and transparent elections, and that everybody's vote counts the same. Thank you.
Edie?
Okay. I'm a member of the Election Law Committee in the legislature. That was my assigned committee. And I will assure you, there's a lot more to the story than you are hearing. And I agree that domicile, and I have no problem with someone coming in and showing their ID and who they are. But make no mistake, the way this bill is set up and the way that they set the requirements for especially students and people who are homeless, people who live in our community but might be staying at Hope House or staying somewhere else, people who are transitional. It might be a senior citizen who's in a nursing home or in a home and they don't know where they're going to be later on because they don't know if they're going to go into assisted living, or maybe they're going to have to go to a nursing home later. Some people who are homeless or transitional can't guarantee that they are going to be at the address they're staying at today, because they might be bunking in with their parents, they might be bunking in with friends. They can't all say for sure where they're going to be, but they live here. This is their home for now, and they don't know where they're going to be. They don't know. Somebody who's looking for a job might be here right now, and he might have been here for the last 2 months, and he has job applications in 4 different places. Maybe he's going to end up in Portland because that's the job that came through. But he's living here now, and he has a right to vote in this country. He's a citizen of this country, and he's living in this community. We're saying that anybody who's in transition and can't guarantee in 60 days they're going to be at this spot, they should not vote. And they have changed the language, some of the language going in as far as what is a domicile and what is a residency. And as far as our students, they're saying now that they're going to have to register their cars. Well, I don't know about and register their cars and get their license with this address. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was in college, we were in 3 or 4 different dormitories during my years, and it has to be a physical address. You can't use the address of the college. You have to use the address where your residence is. And I know my grandchildren, they live in apartments one year, and then they're back in a dorm, and then they're moving. And they're not going to have to go back to the state and change their address every time if an election comes up. I think it's kind of ridiculous. I think sounded good what Matt just said. Yes, if they say they're at the university, that's fine. I would go along with that, but that's not what it says, what the laws say. They have to give the physical address of their residence. So it is difficult for some people, and yet I don't want to disenfranchise these residents, these people who live in our communities. And there's very definite reason they're trying to make it more difficult for students, because students tend to be progressive. And I'll tell you, it was direct party line voting committee. There's no question about it, because these are moves trying to suppress, trying to make it more difficult. And I think it also, there's a common sense to our elections in our communities. If I forget my wallet at home and walk in the door and 6 people say, "Hi, Edie, how are you today?" Been in this town 50 years, I know everybody. They can't use their common sense. I have to turn around, go home, and get my wallet. I think that we should trust our elected officials. If they know people, if they know circumstances, they should be able to say, yes, this is a person who's in our community, who lives in our community, is part of our community. Right now, they're just in transition, but they're here. And today, they're here, they're a citizen, and they can vote. I think that's the way our forefathers meant it, that everybody has the right to vote. Thank you.
All right, the next question will start with Dave. And Dave, let's talk about the Medicare or Medicaid expansion in health care. In 2019, under the Affordable Care Act, the state share will increase to 7%. The federal share, I believe, goes down to 93%. By 2020, the state share will increase to 10%. The federal share will go down to 90%. Is that good for New Hampshire? Not good for New Hampshire? I also read that 33 states have agreed to accept the Affordable Care Act money, but 17 states have not. Basically, what's your position on health care and Medicaid expansion?
Well, I think it will still be a great deal, even if it goes up to 7% or whatever. As far as the number of states that have adopted the ACA and Medicaid expansion, there's 4 more states where it's on the ballot next week, where through referenda processes in those states, citizens have signed petitions in the tens of thousands to get these petitions on the ballot. So there's 4 more states that are very likely to be adopting next week. I want to applaud, first of all, Senator Bradley for his work. I know he was a leader in making the Medicaid expansion in New Hampshire possible, and I recognize that probably wasn't real popular among some members of his party, but it was it was good work, and I thank you for that. Where the money's going to come from to pay the bill when the percentage goes up, I think all the elected leaders are going to have to think about that. I mentioned one possible source of additional revenue earlier, and something else that I would consider is rescinding the tax cut that the legislature passed for the businesses. The large corporations are doing fine. In fact, as I just heard something on NPR the other day, that the income of billionaires last year went up 20%. 20%. The most rich people amongst us are doing very well. I don't really think they need more tax cuts. Instead, we might want to use that revenue to fund Medicaid expansion cost, or to start funding the $5 billion state deficit in its retirement program liabilities, the unfunded liabilities for the state pension program. So those are my views. Thank you.
Matt?
Sure. I think what the state has done with Medicaid expansion was the right move. It's helped a lot of people that needed to be helped. We would have been in a very serious predicament if we hadn't done that. I think going forward, we've got to come up with creative solutions. If the federal government doesn't fix this problem, we're going to have to find ways to do it. I don't think raising business taxes is the solution. I think what we've seen with the lowering of business taxes is more businesses coming into the state and job growth, which has increased the revenue available to the state. So I'm happy also to see that we're going to be lowering, that the insurance costs are going to be going down, health insurance costs will be going down under the Obamacare program. But we've got to, moving forward, we're going to have to deal with this problem. It might not be necessarily easy, but we will find creative ways to do it. Thank you.
Jeb?
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to shout out Steve Schmidt, who is a rep here from Wolfeboro for all of us, and certainly along with Bill Marsh, who is a rep from Brookfield, were absolutely instrumental in getting my bill passed in the House, Senate Bill 313. It's a 5-year reauthorization. Thank God, because it means that 50,000 people will have access to health insurance that's assured. We built taxpayer protection into it. So for my friend Dave, rest assured, we have the funding to pay the state's 10% share.
Okay, good.
It's from various sources. We're not going to need to raise any taxes to pay for Medicaid expansion. One of the reasons that we passed Medicaid expansion in the beginning, not just the health care benefits, which are significant. A healthier workforce is good for New Hampshire. It's good for individuals. But under federal law, if you are in an emergency situation, you go to the emergency room. Well, guess what? We all pay for that. It's called uncompensated care that hospitals pass off to insurance companies that pass off to everybody, either with individual plans of insurance or employer-sponsored insurance. It's a hidden tax. It actually was the largest tax in New Hampshire. So that's why there was so much business community support for what we did on Medicaid expansion. And thankfully, it was a bipartisan effort. And I've seen my role on Medicaid expansion and a lot of other things to pull some of my Republican members on board with a compromise with Democrats. We should see more of that, not only in Concord, but in Washington, to serve people. But I don't think that we should reverse the effort, since Dave brought it up, to raise business taxes. The economy has prospered significantly since we lowered business taxes. We had the 48th worst corporate tax rates in the country. And my Democratic colleagues said, oh, Jeb, you're going to blow a $90 million hole in the budget. Well, no, that didn't happen. What happened is the economy grew. We went from about 50,000 people unemployed in 10 years ago to now only 20,000 people unemployed. Revenue has grown significantly, $330 million higher than what was anticipated. So I believe that we can have Medicaid expansion. We need to depend on the federal funding, which I believe will be there because so many states are using it. But we also need a growing economy, and that is always the best social program, is a good, well-paying job in combination with helping our friends and neighbors that need help. That's what Medicaid expansion did. Thank you, Randy.
Edie?
Thank you. Jeb is right. He did a great job with the Medicaid expansion, and I assure you he had no argument from anybody on my side of the aisle. We worked very hard to get it as well, but he did a great job getting the people that we needed from his side, and I applaud him for that effort. I think I'm hearing an awful lot of how wonderful our economy is, and it is really good, but I don't think that the tax cut that happened last year, that much of which has not taken effect yet or had an influence, I believe our economy is booming because the country has come back from a recession, and I think we've seen the natural growth from that recession, and I hope and I pray that it will continue. But I think we may see a leveling off, so that's not something we can count on forever. But I absolutely believe in universal health care. I think that a healthy population is extremely important, and I think it's a major investment, because if we have regular health care, we're stopping people from getting extremely ill. And With health care, we're also have resources to deal with our opioid crisis. We have resources to deal with our mentally ill. We need to have that health care, and that's an investment in our economy. It's an investment in our people. And I will always support health care for our people. Thank you.
John?
Thank you. I don't think I could do justice to what Senator Bradley said. I think he did an excellent job explaining the position, and I'm not even going to try to, because I think he did a great job answering the question. I feel strongly in supporting him.
Okay, then we'll move to an issue that you all keep touching on peripherally, and let's just hit it directly, which is taxes. You all keep dancing to it, so let's get right to it. New Hampshire reportedly has the 46th lowest overall tax burden in the United States. We generally have had a history of home rule where property taxes are raised at the local level, generally spent at the local level, but regardless, states need revenue to pay bills and to support programs. So the question is, what's your position on an income tax, sales tax, property tax? How should the state raise revenue? Is the system we have a good one, or should we change it? And we are now up with Matt, I think, for you to start.
Sure, thank you. So let me just say right off, I do not support creating new income taxes or creating new sales taxes. We have a property tax in New Hampshire, but a lot of money comes in from the property tax. We have taxes on businesses in New Hampshire. I'd like to see the business taxes lowered more. I think we're making progress with that. I don't think our state government is hurting for money right now. I think there's plenty of money to carry out the programs that they're looking to do. The budget that was passed in 2017, in June of 2017, has record spending on social services, increased funding for treating opioid addiction, increased funding for education, increased funding for our community colleges, increased funding for DCYF. We're taking care of people. We're taking care of social needs. We've sent more monies to the town, $30 million to the towns for bridges and road repair. We're doing a lot of good. We're not downshifting costs to the communities. In other states that have created have gone to an income tax and a sales tax, based on the argument that property taxes are too high, have found that inevitably property taxes remain high. They just end up paying more in overall taxes. I don't want to see that happen in New Hampshire. I think it would hurt the progress that we're making. We really are doing well here, and I'd like to keep it going in that direction. Thank you.
Jeb?
Thank you very much. Folks that believe an income tax or a sales tax, and they believe in it, good for them. I don't. Their argument is if we had a sales tax or we had an income tax or both, it would lower property taxes. Well, I think look at the experience in other states. My parents came from Connecticut. All four of my grandparents lived in Connecticut. Connecticut has among the highest tax burden in the country. And when Lowell Weicker was governor, that was his rationale for implementing an income tax. It didn't happen. They have high property taxes in Connecticut, too. If we had an income tax or a sales tax, we'd end up having a much higher per capita tax burden than we have. Our overall state and local tax burden is right in the middle of the country. We have one of the lowest state tax burdens. With property taxes, it's in the middle. What we have done in New Hampshire for a long period of time without either a sales tax or an income tax is wise fiscal management and pushing toward job growth, as I've talked about already, has given us the resources necessary to attack problems, whether it's upgrades to the agency that deals with child protection, whether it's school safety initiatives, whether it's families with a disabled child, heroin problems, mental health problems, all of which those of us who voted for the budget, we were able to vote for significant increases in revenue because we have a strong economy. And lastly, let me just say, when we're talking about property taxes, as I said in my opening, the biggest threat I think right now for those of us in the Lakes region and other areas of the state is the return of donor towns. There will be, in all likelihood, proposals for new education funding formulas. House Bill 1802, which thankfully never made it to the Senate, was killed by the House, would have re-implemented the statewide property tax. All of us from Wolfeboro would have paid $1.5 million in aggregate more as a community. We don't need an income tax or a sales tax, and a divisive and destructive statewide property tax is not how we deal with education funding. So you have my commitment to go back and take that kind of perspective to Concord. Thank you.
Thank you. Edie?
Okay. I think that the high dependence we have on property taxes that fund most of the services and education and things in our state has a very different burden on our lower income people who are paying 8% of their income on average for their property taxes compared to higher income people who are paying about 3%. I think another issue that's going to hit us with our property taxes for our people and how it's going to increase the cost, and especially for people with the larger homes, is with the great tax cuts that happened in Washington, D.C. We can no longer deduct property taxes. I think that's going to be hitting pretty soon. I think to say that people paying taxes, and I'm not saying we have to join Massachusetts and do that, but it's very interesting that the greatest recovery from the recession and the job growth and the booming economy of New Hampshire is in the southern tier, mostly in the areas that border Massachusetts. And my children, grandchildren who have graduated from college, they're not working in New Hampshire, they're working in Massachusetts. They're going down to Massachusetts because that's where they are finding the higher paying good jobs. I wish they were in New Hampshire. I wish New Hampshire was more welcoming to young people. New Hampshire provides the lowest support in the country for its universities, state universities and state colleges. Our kids are number one in graduating with the highest debt for their colleges. That's probably why many of our kids are leaving the state, because they can get jobs and pay back that college debt faster living in other places. There's a crisis in our state for a lot of our companies who want to come here and want to expand, that they can't get the properly qualified kids. So we are making progress in our state, paying more for some of our social service programs, our support programs. We're making progress, but we're not there yet. If you look at our schools, the state aid to our schools is $3,600 a year. It costs over $16,000 a year per child. And so that's the state aid for our schools. And that might sound, well, we can handle it in Wolfeboro, but there are an awful lot of towns and communities in our state that cannot handle that. And their tax rate per thousand is much higher than it is in Wolfeboro. So I think, again, as I said earlier, we're making progress, we're doing some good things, but that progress is uneven. It affects communities differently because the aid is based on, again, for schools and education, is still based on our property taxes. And there's school districts in our state that are taking away programs for kids because they can't afford to do them. So everything's not great. The big numbers are good, they sound good, but if you go around community to community, I mean, we heard some people in our human services and our children who have special needs, and the other day we had a short forum at the Children's Center, and there's still a lack of services for their children, and these parents who are dealing with a really disabled child are having to try to work, trying to take care of their family, and trying to get services for their children. And the intent is right. We have wonderful people in our agencies trying to meet their needs, but they still have to go to Concord, or they have to drive an hour or 2 hours to get the services they need for their children. So I agree we're making progress. We still have a long way to go, and we need to work together to get there. I don't have all the answers for the best way to do tax our people, but I think that we're intelligent enough. I think that we could sit down together and come up with a way that we can fund the real needs of our state, the real needs of our education and our schools by working together. And it might be a combination of fees, taxes, whatever, but other states are doing it. A lot of them aren't. A lot of places in our country, we're still having the same problems. But we're supposedly a very rich country. We're not a third world country. Other good countries and strong countries have universal health care. They're providing for their education.
Edith, you're going to have to
Okay,
close
I
it.
finished my two. I'm sorry, you just hit something.
We drifted a little bit. I let you go, but
Okay.
we got to get two more guys in as well. So, John?
I don't support either a sales tax and income tax. The best way to think about an income tax in the simplest terms, you go out and buy a car for $25,000. If it's a 5% sales tax, you're going to pay $1,250 to the state. You go out and buy a pair of Levi's for $60. You're going to pay 5% of the price of Levi's to the state. Any clothing, anything like that. Hopefully the Democrats, I don't think it'll ever happen, won't also make the sales tax on groceries and things like that. But that's the best way to look at it. Where is that money going that they're going to want, given the sales tax? I think we've got pretty good roads compared to Massachusetts. Massachusetts has a sales tax and income tax. Our roads are a heck of a lot better than down there, and we're doing fine. We've got a $100 million rainy day fund. And interesting to note that a lot of the things that Representative Damaris talked about were included in this year's budget to help the children, help DCYS, help improve more beds. And as I recall, I believe she voted against this year's budget. So you can't have it both ways. Okay, there was a good budget, $100 million rainy day fund, and it took care of a lot of issues that she spoke about, yet she didn't vote in favor of that budget.
And Dave?
Thank you. Well, I've lived in New Hampshire long enough that I sort of like the current arrangement. I'm not looking to push for an income tax or a sales tax, a general sales tax or a general income, but I should point out that we do have a sales tax. It's called the Meals and Rooms tax. That's a sales tax. We also have an income tax. It's the tax on dividends and interest that some of us have the privilege of paying every year, which I don't begrudge to the state at all. So we do have limited forms of those forms of taxation. But I don't think that we should be giving away tax revenues that we already have, like the tax cuts to the businesses. I think we should hang on to the revenues that we already have, because we have big ticket items like the $5 billion deficit in the unfunded pension liabilities that's going to need to be addressed. Also, a couple gentlemen have mentioned DCYF and how it's being taken care of in the state budget. That's not my understanding. My understanding is the agency's far short of the number of social workers that it needs. That it needs another 50 or so social workers. So I don't think that the state's needs are being totally adequately funded, and I don't believe we should be giving away revenues that we don't need to give away.
All right, it's 5 minutes past where I wanted to get to closing remarks. We have 10 minutes left. There's 5 of you. You can do the math. That's 2 minutes each. So if we could maybe go in reverse order, start with you, Matt. If you could make a 2-minute closing statement, that would be great.
Oh, sure. Thank you. So I think we have a real divide here between the candidates, at least on this for state representative. I think what John and I are saying is the state's doing well. Let's stay the course. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Let's keep trying to increase revenues, promote job growth, attract more businesses to the state, and do that the way we've been doing it. Let's also keep looking for ways to increase spending on social services while we're doing that. And let's not raise new income taxes and new sales taxes. Let's find ways to do this while protecting the New Hampshire advantage. Thank you.
Dave?
Thank you. Well, as I stated in my introduction, I think I'm uniquely qualified for this position for the House of Representatives because I know Wolfeboro's town government inside and out, the needs of the community, and basically what the community is trying to achieve. Relative to some of the opponents here like to reference the New Hampshire advantage and how well we're doing, but they don't talk about any of the disadvantages, like how we have lowest state support for a state university of any state in the country with the highest tuition rates for college students in the country. So there's advantages and there's disadvantages. I don't think we should just act like there's only advantages. Again, I have grown to love the town of Wolfeboro. It's become my home, and I look forward to the opportunity to continue to serve you in a new capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. John?
Okay, thank you for coming, folks. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and voice some of my thoughts or opinions, I guess, on some of the matters. Again, I give me a word. I won't support any sales or income tax. I'll always think of all the people of Wolfeboro when I make decisions, not one particular Republican or Democrat, but try to get the feeling where it's good for everybody. And I proved myself for the past 20 years in the budget committee as being a bipartisan person. On the budget committee, we're not Republicans or Democrats. We're citizens of Wolfeboro. We talk things out and we try to do what's best for the town. I hope if you vote for me, I'll be able to bring that knowledge and that experience down to Concord. Thank you.
Edie?
Hi. I think we have to think of what is happening in Concord and not as these issues are complex. You don't have any simplistic answers. For instance, he said, oh, I voted for that budget. I voted against increasing the funding that was in that budget. The budget is a very complex document with many different issues within it. I voted against that budget because I voted against the tax break for the large corporations. I did not vote against the human service and educational funding because I strongly felt that should have been even higher. I agree. I think we're making progress with the budget. I just don't think we're there yet. I worked for a nonprofit for 25 years, a very successful nonprofit for 25 years. I know how to make every penny go a million miles. So I am not a spendthrift. I don't throw money at issues and at problems. I work very hard to try to make every dollar go as far as it can go. But I think we need to look at our priorities, to measure our priorities, and then settle down and get to work and try to appropriately meet the needs of the state, because that's our responsibility and why we were elected. Thank you.
Jeb?
Thank you, Randy. Chamber of Commerce, thank you very much. All of you, thanks for coming and attending, and everybody that's watching us on TV, thank you for that. It's been an honor and a pleasure to serve the town of Wolfeboro as well as this region and this state in my many capacities. Since my lack of focus was raised on local issues by my opponent in his letter, let me just address some of the local issues that I'm really involved with right now, trying to fix the intersection of 171 and 28, making sure that water projects that Governor Lynch cut 10 years ago get fully funded, school safety initiatives, and I'll be proposing further road and bridge upgrades throughout the district next year. Local issues are very important. That's why I supported the biomass override, because as I said in my opening, my top priority is always a growing economy and jobs. And there's been a lot of discussion about the business taxes. The proof's in the pudding. Revenue is up, job growth is up, and amazingly, New Hampshire has the lowest rate of poverty in the nation. That's something to be proud about. That's the reason why we lead the charts in so many different surveys on education, on health care, on livability, on safety in our streets, because we manage well. When I became the majority leader, we had an $800 million budget deficit, and I'd remind my good friend Dave, who talks about the pension unfunded liability, I led efforts to correct that, and it was Governor Lynch again who proposed the cutting of the revenue that went to municipalities. So jobs are my most important thing, but let me also talk about what I think is very important. We have disagreements. You saw them tonight. But my role as the Republican leader in the Senate is to work with Donna Soucy and Dan Feltz and the Democrats, as well as my colleagues, whether it's Medicaid expansion, whether it's affordable housing, where we put $5 million into the Affordable Housing Fund. My legislation helped veterans get better access to health care at hospitals throughout New Hampshire, while the VA hospital has flood damage. I worked with the governor and David Waters, a Democratic senator from Dover, on a kindergarten initiative. We now pay for full funding for kindergarten. That was certainly bipartisan. One of the bills that I'm most pleased about was something I had to fight the insurance companies over, to require the newest state-of-the-art technology for three-dimensional mammograms. It's life-saving technology. It wasn't covered by insurers, and so a lot of women were only getting 2D mammograms. 3D mammograms lead to earlier detection. That's life-saving. I think everybody in Wolfeboro knows how I led efforts on animal cruelty because of the Great Dane situation. And lastly, I'm really proud of what we did on biomass. I thank Edie for having voted with it. I thank all of the Carroll County reps and North Country reps who did it. I just believe that the governor didn't have all the information. It's my top priority to protect your jobs. You send me back there, that'll continue to be my top priority. A growing economy with good paying jobs so that we have the resources to solve problems. Thank you, Randy.
All right, thank you to the Wolfeboro Area Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this event. Thank you, President Melanson and Executive Director DeVries for setting this all up. Thank you for the candidates for coming, for being civil, collegial, had an excellent exchange of ideas. Thought you all did a very, very good job. And thank you all for coming and listening. It's difficult being up here and answering questions, and we have to thank them for their willingness to serve. Best to all of you. Thanks very much.